Gentlemen, thank you for taking some time in the middle of managing all of this madness to share some insights with the community at large.
Paul, thank you very much for having us. And
Thanks for having us, Paul.
I did recommend David Spisak, but I thought it was appropriate that during this time of uncertainty, that David has been a trusted friend and advisor to me and to the team at Paragon. And I can tell you that David has access to resources in terms of people and information that has been critical for us to set up the beginning of the way through here. And I'm going to tell you this, we're in the middle of a storm in New York, as you said, Paul, but David has helped me to see where that light is. And I see a glimmer of hope in the middle of this. So it's really, it's great to be here with you, Paul.
Very great. David, why don't you just introduce yourself, since fewer people probably are familiar with your kind of your pedigree in automotive and what it is that you do. Why don't you take a minute and tell us?
So my name is David Spisak, and I'm a car guy. I love the car business. I've been in the car business for 38 years. I'm a former retailer. I've done most of the positions in a dealership over my 26-year retail career. For the last 13 years, Paul, I've been creating software solutions and continuing to work with dealerships on the consulting side to assist them and their teams in navigating these the variety of different economic situations that we've gone through, and just some of the things that have changed dramatically in the industry to assist them in creating a sustainably successful organization. I'm also the managing director for Haig Partners, and Haig Partners, we are the leading sell-side advisory firm. We've done about $5.2 billion in transactions, leading our dealer client through that scenario. And we're certainly seeing some more of that, and we're going to see more of that as time goes on, I believe. And but we also have an investment bank, and we work with a lot of vendors that work with dealers. And my role is a managing director as we assist them in raising capital, helping them in growth strategies, helping them to do a better job of connecting with their clients. And that's actually really important right now as we go through this.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Obviously a wealth of knowledge here. Brian, I know that people are very, very curious. Wherever you are in the country, you're hearing about New York City, you're seeing the numbers. To have such a leader in the industry that really is a savvy operator and often championed as a pioneer and very progressive, to see that you have been the first one through. We've been talking today about the fact that this is rolling through each individual location like a wave. And some people are getting into it first, which means they're going to get out of it first. And that's become very clear with the modeling out there. So you, Brian, being one of the first in, will be one of the first out. Can you tell us how things have progressed over the last 3 weeks for you and your stores?
3 weeks ago, let's talk about mid-March, early March. My dealership was, we were experiencing the impact of the COVID virus, but my store is an incredibly resilient store. I have the best management team in the United States of America. And these guys were pushing through, putting themselves at potentially personal harm's way. And midway through the month, our Acura store was 1 unit behind where it was last year, which is unbelievable considering they had a record-breaking year last year. The Honda store was a few more units behind, probably about 30 units behind. But in terms of the dealership dynamics and the profitability, we were way up midway through. So I was of the opinion, hey, this isn't so bad. We're going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And I would.
And this is 3 weeks ago.
This is on the 13th. I was having dinner with 2 colleagues from Acura, and we were having dinner, and I was saying, it's not that bad. We'll be okay. And then while we were at dinner, and imagine that, having dinner with friends. But I was while we were at dinner, we got the word that the NBA was closed. And one of the gentlemen that was there with me said, hey, that's kind of strange that they would close the NBA down. And it seemed that all of a sudden, quickly, things deteriorated. We went from 20 cars to 15 cars a day to 8 cars to 10 cars a day. And on not this Sunday, but the Sunday before, all the dealers in New York State were ordered to be closed. I want to say on a personal note that I'm not just seeing this in our community at an overwhelming level. I'm seeing it personally. Paul. I have COVID-19. I am 2 weeks into self-quarantine, or 13 days into self-quarantine.
Wow.
And this is a very, very serious infection. It attacks young and old, rich and poor, black and white, whatever your religion is. And we're hearing that, well, if you're healthy and you're young, you're okay. And I have to say, that's not my experience. I've got a very young, strong, energetic crew of people, and it's hitting every community around us. It's hitting every community, and especially in New York. Picture this. New York, in the market that we're in, Queens, has two airports, LaGuardia Airport and Kennedy Airport. Those airports represent the North Shore of Queens and the South Shore of Queens, JFK. And picture some family coming in from a country that's, in February, that's impacted by this. And that family is a family of five or so. And they get into New York's Kennedy Airport, and they take an Uber into the city. This is February now, we're imagining this. And the family of five then goes to Times Square. They go to a Broadway show. They go to maybe a sporting event. And they, of course, are staying at a hotel. They get in a different Uber, and they go back to their country of origin. Just imagine how many people those five people came in contact with, and then the Uber drivers, and subsequent to that, those Uber drivers, how many people they came in contact with. And you've got on the north and the south side of us, you've got that dynamic going on. And it's not to say that it's people from out of the country, and it's not to say that it's Uber drivers that are spreading it, but you've got that influx in a city that's very close. You've got some mass transit. You've got a subway system, you've got a train system, you've got a bus system that many of our associates and our customers take advantage of. And that may end up being sort of a silver lining. We may see a return to personal use vehicles. We may see a return to sedan sales, as people are saying, hey, wait a second. The Uber doesn't necessarily, or the rideshare doesn't necessarily pencil out. And I want control of my personal safety. And so we may see a return to personal use vehicles in a way that maybe is not being properly forecasted.
That's well, first of all, thank you. Appreciate you sharing the personal notes. And I see on the comments on LinkedIn a lot of prayers, and somebody said, "Kick that virus's ass, Brian." And you kind of have that Chuck Norris persona about him, like that. You look well, and it's very clear that you're fighting the fight, and it's very clear that there's a lot of support out there. And I think your transparency goes a long way in letting people know, like, hey, it's real.
Paul,
At the very,
I didn't ask to get it.
of course not.
I didn't ask to get it, and I'm not ashamed of getting it. I am sad that I affected my wife by this, and that's something that I hope nobody experiences. That knowing that I gave this to my wife is really has been the hardest part of it, and seeing her through it, and then making sure that my team is safe going forward is super important. As a side note, David Spisak's wife is a doctor, and she's in the middle of this on the West Coast as well, and she's been super supportive in giving me guidance through this. Although she's not my personal physician, she certainly could advise what direction I should and should not be going in.
That's very, very good. Well, thank you for sharing that. Want to talk about what you just said. I hadn't heard that. Like you said, maybe a little bit of a silver lining, but without a doubt, we're going to be changed forever, in the sense that just our behaviors are there's not going to be a gate that opens and all of a sudden we're all handshakes, all hugs, all backpacked in mass transit. Like, that is not going to happen. It's very clear. It's going to be a gradual moving back to that. But there are some things that we may never go back to. Earlier in the conversation, we were, when I was with Jason Stein and Jim Fitzpatrick, we were talking about, the technology to just make the in-car experience healthier with HEPA filters and, high-end air filtration, like how that's likely to start moving. But your comment on, like, having more control of your personal space is definitely bumped up on the priority list. Like, it's already happened, right? That has already happened. So interesting in seeing the momentum shifting, we're so far towards Uber and rideshare, so far toward, car sharing, to see something like this, all of a sudden, no pun intended, put the brakes on it and move it back is a very real thing. David, what is your thought on that? Because you obviously think about things 360 and holistically. What do you think about that?
I think Brian's absolutely right, and I think it goes beyond that, honestly, Paul, because it's going to certainly apply to Lyft. It's going to apply to Uber. It's going to apply to taxis in high-density cities, especially. People, I've been saying this, for the last 2 months. Things are never going to be the same. Everybody, they're never going to be the same. Now, that doesn't mean that they can be bad or they're going to be bad. We have an awful lot to do with that, how we come out of this, how we emerge.
Right.
But they are going to be different. People will be forever changed. People will have a form of PTSD, if you will, off of this. There are people that are going to not hug people anymore, are not going to be prone to shaking hands like they used to. And just like Brian's referring to the Ubers and the Lyfts, I'm saying, what about taxis? What about people standing like this in the subway system on the D train or the L train or whatever it is? Do we think that's going to happen to that same degree anytime soon? I
Right.
don't think so. I think people
Right.
are going to start to look for other options. And, Brian, he called it out correctly. There is definitely an expense. Hey, I don't have a car payment. I use Uber. I use Lyft.
Mm-hmm.
You do have a car payment. You absolutely have a car payment.
Absolutely.
So if you're using Uber or Lyft every single day that you're traveling in and out of the city, say from New Jersey, or any significant commute, around the country, there's a pretty decent cost to that. So you can actually save money by going out and buying a car or a small SUV and take total control of your personal safety.
We make the trade-off every day, right? Security for freedom, right? Convenience for freedom. We make it with our privacy. We make it with our politics. And now the trade-off is going to happen, but more in the element of personal safety. The trade-off is, do I want a fixed car payment or a variable car payment with Uber? Well, the variable now is my personal safety. So I'm willing to make the trade-off.
Paul, people are going to demand. People have been demanding before this event. They're demanding shared control of the process, and now they're also going to demand shared control of the process and safety as they perceive that safety to be. And I think we're in a different place. You'll never look at a door handle the same, right?
Nope.
I looked at a door handle, and I'm trying to figure out opening a door handle. Well, where were the least amount of people have touched that door handle? The problem is everybody's thinking along the same lines.
I do that too. Underside, close to the
right.
I'll grab the top of the door.
And people taking their sleeve and covering. And so just think about something like that, that maybe with the dealership doors have to change to where you don't have to touch the door. And there's probably a million of things that we need to think of along those lines. But I think, shared control of the process has been important. You think of a Peloton, people like to pick the instructor, pick the genre of the music, pick the intensity, the length of class. They want shared control. And I think that's one of the things that is going to be the savior for those of us that have advanced in digital retailing, that you can go online, and you could go online for 3 years at Paragon and buy a car online or order service online without going to the dealership. And now all of a sudden we are at an inflection point where this is where the industry is going. That doesn't mean the end of the showroom, but now all of a sudden there's going to be a significant amount of people that say, hey, why go to the showroom at all? There's no need for it. We've been able to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that we can conclude a service transaction online with the customer ordering it from their phone or using voice technology to speak to Google and order a service through Paragon, completely frictionless. We'll pick up your car, we'll service it, and we'll put it back in your driveway. You'll get greater transparency than you would get at the typical service experience that you would get from an independent or even from another qualified dealer. So we think that we're positioned to serve the needs of our customers moving forward. That being said, all of us as retailers have to be super careful not to try and come across as being exploitive. And our stores are open. Our stores are open for online transactions only for the sales department and for pickup and delivery and for service in the service facilities. We're not doing that for profit. It's not going to pencil out. We're doing it because we want to keep our men and women working that can be kept working, that want to work. We're doing it because we have an obligation to serve the community that we're in, that people legitimately need our services. And we're doing it because we have an obligation to our manufacturer to hold up our end of it. And let nobody misconstrue this as a profit strategy. There is no way at this time that will pencil out. But I think there's a bigger picture here, and hopefully, and in a very safe manner, we can provide those services for our customers and keep our staff and customers safe.
That message right there is one that needs to be louder, because it's very, car dealers, I think as an industry, we're making our way back from the stigma. And I think there have been a lot of great advances over the last years in that. But still, I saw some funny memes about car dealers, right? And one is like this disaster scene where there's like a meteor falling. It says the rest of the world. And then it's got a picture of a guy like this, and it says car dealers. And the guy saying, we have cars for sale, right? So I think that the perception is that the dealers are trying to stay open to make a dollar at all expenses, but they don't understand that it doesn't pencil. Like there's no way, like we're efficient businesses and we're meant to be fully open. And if we're not fully open, then it doesn't work anymore.
David Spisak hit me right between the eyes, and he said, I want you to build a P&L statement for the month of April. And I want you to, build May and June. Like after I built the one for April, I didn't want to look at May or June. Okay. But I built one for April, and he said, I want you to pencil in zero income. Now I can tell you this, I have contingency plans for a 10% pullback or 20%, even a 30 or 40% pullback. No scenario ever in my career did I build one for zero income. And when I put that together, it's ugly, but it's real. And that's why, I went to somebody like David, because he's not going to fluff it up and say, yeah, go ahead, you can push through this. Let's look at the worst case scenario. Let's look at the variables in there. And now let's make it better. And I can say this, it's we will not face a situation, or I do not foresee us facing a situation where there's zero revenue. Our teams are there. There's surprising levels of interest in doing business, even under these dire circumstances. And I can only see that getting better. The stimulus package that dealers can apply for, I think starting on Friday, will help us, but that's not going to be able to help us till the beginning of May or June, maybe a little sooner. Maybe we can get the money sooner. So the dealers are taking it on the chin right now to get from today to the end of the month. And, we're talking about millions of dollars in hard expense at many dealerships that the dealers are going to be sadly responsible for. So as I was talking with a colleague today, it's not business as usual. I need you to provide great service for the customers. We need to do this for a reasonable return on our investment. We need to keep our employees safe. We need to keep our customers safe and monitor this every day. We're on a day-by-day basis at looking at everything and all the variables that we can look at.
David, you were going to weigh in there during that. What do you have to say?
Yeah, I just think that it's really important. We have this tendency as Americans, we always want to know how the story ends, right? How does this book end? Where does this all end up? And the thing is, you got to slow down right now. This is a time to take a pause and really assess where you are and what life is really going to look like in April, May, or June. And this goes for not just dealers, this goes for third-party solution providers, vendors to the industry, everybody. And what's most important on the dealership side is they absolutely need to make this 3-month pro forma so they could see what is April, May, and June likely to look like. April is going to have very little, if any, revenue. May, I don't want to shock anybody, but I'd be willing to bet, certainly in most metro areas, certainly areas that are seeing a high degree of COVID right now, you're not going to see any big recovery in May. And I think it's likely that the feds are going to continue to have the shelter in place or the social distancing in place. But it will get better. And then June will start to get better. However, if they do this 3-month pro forma, what's really critical is at least you will know where you stand from a cash flow perspective. And when Dr. Nicole was on earlier and you were getting questions about, how do I deal with this? How anxious do you feel? And how do you navigate through it? One of the best things that anybody can do is figure out exactly where they are. And then from there, they could figure out the next steps. And speaking of which, the next step is they need to communicate with all of their employees, and not just up front, but it's just like David Long was saying, where some dealers are communicating via Zoom every single day just to reach out to them, because there's a lot of dealers out there that are nervous. They're nervous because they've had to lay off or furlough 50 to 70% of their employees or more. They're nervous about how that's going to impact the emotional and financial well-being. But they're also nervous, frankly, about, hey, how am I going to get all these people back? And when am I going to get them back? So one of the best ways to do that is to stay in touch, make sure your people do know how much you care about them. And the third thing is they've got to take the steps now to make sure they can apply for this loan. Even though this is $2.2 trillion, it's not $2.2 trillion for us in the car business.
Right.
It's a much smaller number than that, a much smaller number. And guess what? I hate to say it, but that pot's going to run out of money at some point. So if you're too late to the game, you may end up finding yourself in a rather unfortunate situation when it comes to picking up that money. And last but not least, once you have that money, you've got 8 weeks, essentially. It's like you're on a game show. You have 8
Spend it, right?
that money and spend it in an intelligent way that is going to minimize the negative impact, that's going to maximize your ability to use the forgiveness side of it. And that means you got to decide, who am I going to keep on staff? Who am I not? And what's really important there, Paul, for everybody, and this goes for vendors as much as dealers, but you need to identify who are the top 25% associates, performers, mover shakers in your company. And they may not be just top 25% in productive revenue. They might be a top 25% because of their impact on culture. But the thing is, to the greatest degree possible, what's key is please protect those people, because this is a newsflash. The bottom 75% are going to be the first ones coming back to your store and say, hey, boss, I'm ready to go. Okay, the top 25% can get a job anywhere. And so they're going to all of a sudden find themselves with options possibly out there. And you just want to make sure they know they are cared about, they're loved, they're appreciated, and you have great loyalty to them.
Real great insight from the other side. Brian, I'd like to ask you a question that's been asked by the audience. What is the number one thing you're doing to maintain morale at your dealership? I think that pivots right off of what David was just saying. So Brian, what are you doing within Paragon to keep morale up?
Well, I'm at home, my home office, and I'm pretty diligent about every day having a Zoom meeting with the team. In fact, we have one scheduled right after this to give them the information that as we have it. And that information sometimes is, I don't have an answer. And it's really a tough thing when people are looking to you for leadership, to be honest with them and say, I don't have the answer. But the good news, Paul, is that yesterday we got the answer. Yesterday we got the application. Yesterday we got the answer in terms of when we can apply for this, which is Friday, when we can expect to get some economic relief, which is going to be once our application is accepted and approved. And I'm ballparking that last week in April, maybe sooner, and then we can bring all of our people back to work. In the meantime, sometimes the most benevolent thing we can do is to say to somebody, go on unemployment. Right now, the benefits are better than they've ever been. Right. You've got a state unemployment, you've got a federal component of the unemployment, and your people can do pretty good on that. And that's not to say we don't care about you. That's not to say you're not in that select 25% group. It's to say we want to throw as big a net over as many people as we can to protect them during this period. And so, there are a certain amount of people that we're going to need to operate. I need to be able to throw the ball to people that can catch the ball, that are in the field, that know the drill. This is not practice now. This is life and death. Okay. The company's a living organism. I'm not going to favor the person that goes and gets coffee every day. I need the guy, the gal that knows how to contribute net profit to the bottom line in each department. And the other people play an important and a vital role. But right now, they may need to seek shelter and comfort and safety of unemployment, and the benefits are better. The rest of the gang that's on may have to understand that you're not going to be making the same amount of money during this 3 weeks that you're used to making. That's the unfortunate world that we're in. None of us are. Dealers are looking at losing millions of dollars. I was on a 20 group call with one of the 20 groups that I'm in, and I saw really intelligent, really successful businessmen that were nervous, man. They were nervous, and we were on a call looking for answers from one another, and there was a shortage of answers. There was a lot of questions, no shortage of questions, but shortage of answers.
Of course.
David and I are part of a group, a very select group around the country, and I can tell you that there's some really sharp people that are thinking things through. And so, in order for me to be able to bring the best possible resources back to the dealership and to the team, I engaged with these people. And I say during the economic crisis in the 70s, there was what was known as the Power Breakfast at the Regency Hotel in New York City, where Tish, the owner of the hotel, would have the local politicians, the local businessmen, the local banks, the local politicians all get together at breakfast every day to work on fixing the problems that face New York City. And that tradition continues. And I thought, what a good idea it would be for us to do the same thing around the country. And we were able to put together some incredibly bright minds. And David Spisak really was key with a couple of other gentlemen in putting that group together. And I sit there and I realize, man, these men are thinking on a completely different level of problems and solutions to look at. And one of them discussed the problem with used cars and the drop in used car valuations that's going to hit. And even though many of the banks are giving us forgiveness on curtailments for 90 days, I can tell you this: at the end of 90 days, the forgiveness period is up, and you could see some curtailments that cause a different drain on cash flow as the banks are demanding that we curtail those cars. And that could be, depending on the size of your inventory, several $100,000 in cash. So, I remember saying to David after I got off the call, I came to this call for solutions, and I'm crapped out after the call. But better that you understand some of the problems that are ahead.
It's real. It's reality.
It's reality. And it was, again, of all the things I'm looking at, I wasn't looking at that. And so, we need to be really judicious and making sure that we're addressing those issues. And I don't want to talk about business. It's kind of like it's a punch in the stomach. I know people that are sick.
Yeah.
And so the first thing, this is like, I've never been in a war, but this is the closest I've felt to being in war. We've got soldiers that we're sending out there into the field, and they're getting, they're potentially getting exposed and getting sick. And it's a really difficult thing to realize that you're responsible for asking people to step up in that direction. So, selling a couple extra cars, we'll be back on our feet and we'll sell cars. The most important thing we can do now is to make sure our people are good.
Yeah. Paul, if I could just weigh in on that.
Of course.
On that note, as Brian said, my wife is a doctor, and she happens to be a COVID doctor. So she's one of the healthcare workers, one of the doctors literally on the front lines. And so, I'm here when she's not working, and she's on these calls 3 times a day. They're literally 6 hours worth of calls a day that they're on. And when they're not working, just learning as much as they can. And, this, to say this is real is an understatement. It's a gross understatement. And what I mean by that is she was just notified 2 days ago, you got to find your own scrubs, but we will give you directions on how to disinfect your scrubs every day. Mm-hmm. You got to find your own mask. The surgical mask that they use, they typically use when they go in to see a patient, and then they throw it away. Then it went from that being 20 masks a day to giving them 1 mask to last the whole day, which doesn't work. These are not meant to keep the virus out.
Right.
But then now they're given masks and said, you need to use this mask for 5 days, 3 days, 5 days, or longer. They've got to find their own personal equipment, personal protective equipment. And it's terrible. And in my case, and a lot of hospital workers, people don't hear these stories, but the call they had yesterday is, where are we going to house all these doctors so that they don't get their family sick or potentially accidentally kill somebody? And in Oregon, there's an actual ad that says, don't accidentally kill somebody. Mm-hmm. Think of the power of that. Just by not adhering to these standards, of personal standards to space, or if people that go out and buy surgical masks, when an average person doesn't need a surgical medical quality mask, Go out and, buy a bandana, and that's good enough. But there's a big impact. This is very real. It hits at the source. In our case, my wife is moving out this weekend, and our 3-year-old, our 5-year-old, and myself won't see her for at least 2 months, face to face. So,
that's real.
That's real, man. And so in the meantime, you do the best that you can. Any human does. First and foremost, take care of your family, take care of yourself. And as Brian said, take care of your employees, love your employees. For us vendors that are out there in the marketplace, do as much as we can to serve. At this point, we should be philanthropic. We should be serving these dealers, kind of like what David Long said. And it's not just a matter of necessarily reducing our rates. That's great, that helps. But they also need help, man. This is so complicated. It's so complex. And all the layers of this, it's not like that category 4 or 5 hurricane or that tornado that comes blowing through and the dealer's down for 3 or 4 weeks and they start to come back in a huge way.
And by the way, when that happens, it destroys thousands of cars that need to be replaced.
But yes, good point.
Right.
Well, yeah, when it happened in Houston, they literally had thousands of vehicles that were destroyed. We don't have that.
Yep.
When you have a hurricane, you don't have millions of people losing their job and losing their income.
Yep.
You don't have these situations. You don't have, when you have something like that, it's a physical catastrophe. When you have something like a big flu roll around, it's a health catastrophe. This is emotional, physical, financial, mental, and it does take a toll on people. It's overwhelming. So any of us vendors, in any way that we can, that reaches out and say, listen, there's no charge, there's no strings, there's no cost. If you need resources, tools, how-tos, spreadsheets, or help, we're here. And that's the best thing we can do to serve our dealers right now.
I think we're just about out of time. I think I'm going to sum this up by saying this is when leaders lead, and it has always been my conviction as a CEO, saying my job is to provide the most amount of opportunity for the most amount of people, and that's in the business world. But I think in leadership in general, Brian, made an allusion to what it's like to be in the military or literally be making decisions that can influence other people's health and safety, but still in the midst of that, making decisions that make sure everyone is as protected as possible, not just our health and safety, but our livelihood and the people that depend on us. It's a complex thing, and it's the same thing. Brian, go ahead.
I want to quote a great philosopher, Mike Tyson. Everyone's got a plan until they get hit. And, and then once you get hit, your plan is one thing: survival. And
that's it.
so, I thought that Paragon had some pretty good contingency plans for a lot of things, and then we got hit. And and then the plan then becomes survival. And I'm thankful to have some incredible men and women that work with me, and they're running the ship. I'm here in the basement of my house, trying to do the best I can to provide guidance and leadership from afar. And to me, you can't lead. Leadership from the basement is like pushing with a string. I can't wait. I can't wait to get there and get back up on top of the tank and take our team through this. And,
amen to that. Well, guys, thank you so much for sharing your time. I can tell by the comments and the love that's coming through on the live feed that you've been a massive encouragement, and people very much appreciating your hyper-realistic view. I think there's a lot of empowerment in there for the automotive community at large. And gentlemen, thank you so much for carving a few minutes out, and look to stay in touch. And of course, wishing you all the best of health. Prayers are with you, David, with your wife as she serves. Thank you both. We'll be talking soon.
Thank you. All the best to all of you. Wish you well. And if there's anything we can do, please let us know. But above all, I just hope everybody stays safe. And I know that we will get through this. We will get through this.
All right, man. Thank you, Paul. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. We'll talk to you soon. Be well.
Thank you.